Hi, my name is Jeff Foster. I'm a technical marketing engineer with Cisco Systems, and we're here for the April installment of the UCS Tech Talk series, and we're going to talk about UCS Central 1.3 and what's new in the world of UCS Central. So with me today, I've got a number of panelists. First, we've got Carlos Pantaza, UI Development Manager. We've got Eric Williams, a regular guest of the show here, a technical marketing engineer, and Jacob Van Ewyk, a product manager for UCS Central. So Jacob, let's go ahead and get it started with you. For those customers and those out there that are new to UCS Central, could you tell us a little bit about what it is and what the use cases are that are driving customer adoption?
Absolutely. So UCS Central is best understood as a manager of UCS managers. As people might be aware, when you use UCS servers, you can use UCS Manager, and that allows us to define complete server identities through software. The limitation of UCS Manager is that it's limited to a pair of fabric interconnects, or what we call a domain, with a maximum of 160 servers. And you may want multiple domains because you scale beyond that, or you have them in multiple locations. There's a number of reasons you have multiple domains. So UCS Manager is really the manager of UCS Manager. It is built on the UCS management functionality, and there's some main use cases for using it. And the nice thing about it is it offers us a crawl, walk, run environment. So you can adopt it at the pace you want. If you just link them together, you get an information dashboard that spans across all of these domains. So you see your inventory, your faults. You can launch KVM sessions. You can get statistics like power and bandwidth and thermal across all of the domains in your environment. So that's kind of the first use case, the crawling. I just want visibility across everything. The second major use case is for setting up new domains. So instead of setting up ID pools and setting up domain infrastructure policies like time zones and DNS servers and LDAP servers, you could set those all up as policies in UCS Central, and as you bring new domains online, all you have to do is point to those global policies and pull them down and make setting up a new domain a matter of minutes. And then third step really is starting to take the policies that manage a UCS environment and globalizing them, or using them in Central so that they work across domains. And there's two ways to do it. The first way is just to have some global policies that are referenced from UCS Manager. And this gives you standardization across a domain. Let's say you want a standard disk scrub policy across all of the domains and all of the servers. And you want to make sure they stay in sync and they're standardized, because we all know that in a data center, standardization drives down costs, particularly OpEx costs. And then the top level, if you really want to call it the run level, is take all of your policy management, all of your template management, all of your service profile or server identity management, and make that global. And it gives you some advantages over UCS Manager, not just through the standardization, but now I can take a template and run it on one domain in one data center, and let's say it's a VMware ESX host, and at another point, if I want to move it, I can move it to a different server in a different domain in the same data center, and depending on your setup, potentially even move it to a different data center. So it gives you that standardization plus that global control. The nice thing is you can adopt it at the pace you want and the pace that makes sense.
Great. So that's a good foundation of what is UCS Central in broad strokes. Now let's drill into some of the main themes for the UCS Central 1.3 release. Could you share a little bit more about that?
So there's really three main themes for this release, and we'll look at a number of them in more depth with Eric and Juan Carlos. First one is that we have completely redesigned the front end of UCS Central. It's a new HTML5-based UI that's task and search driven instead of hierarchy driven. we really took a lot of time and effort to think about how would we manage a large-scale environment using UCS Central and use that as a driver. The second thing is that we have a new platform coming from the UCS team called the Cisco M series. We have pre-enabled that. So when that platform comes out, it will be managed through UCS Central as well. And then third, we've got a number of feature enhancements. And we'll go into detail on some of these a little bit later. But things like, based on customer feedback, like using NFS for our shared data store in a high availability environment instead of RDM. We have domain-specific ID pools. So within an ID pool, being able to have a range of IDs available for that specific domain. In the past, that was only available through local service profiles. Now we can use them in global service profiles. We can push VLANs and VSANs directly to UCS Manager without pushing down a global service profile. We've improved the third-party certificate handling. We supported scriptable vMedia. We are bringing all the faults into the UCS Central database. And we have increased the scope of management from the number of endpoints that we can manage.
So it sounds like there's quite a few enhancements that we can dig into here today. Let's go ahead and start with the last one that you mentioned, the number of endpoints. So how has scale changed between UCS Central 1.2 and with 1.3?
So we architected and designed UCS Central with the goal of managing 10,000 servers. The reality is most of our customers have nowhere near that many. And so we've been working up to those scale numbers over releases. Last scale, we had, our last release, we supported about 4,000 servers, which is the primary scale number that drives our environment, over 100 different domains. So that's 100 domains of 40 servers for about 4,000 servers. And we tested that extensively. This time we've upped that number. It's now 6,000 servers and 200 domains. So whether you have fewer domains with a larger number of servers or more domains with a smaller number of servers, we've done a lot of enhancements to make sure that as we grow our scale, it runs properly, it runs smoothly. And we do actually have a couple of users that we know who are running this type of scale numbers today, and pushing the boundaries of what we do and driving us to push this even higher.
So it sounds like it'll be really useful for those customers in particular.
Absolutely.
Now we talked about the updated user experience. I think that's where you started with some of the changes that came into Central 1.3. Could you talk about the driver behind enhancing the user experience?
Yep. So as we move from a smaller scale environment of a single domain with a max of 160 servers, the existing UI used a hierarchy going down the side of the screen, and you would have to go find the object and then decide what your action was on that object. And that works well for a limited environment. 100, 150, you could scroll through a list, and at 160 it's starting to get long. But you can find what you're looking for. If we're talking now about thousands and the goal of 10,000s, suddenly scrolling through a list to find the device you need isn't efficient. So that's where we came up with let's change how we do this and use search. And the way we sometimes said is, we need to find a needle in a haystack. The way we were doing it wasn't efficient at large scale. Or maybe it was for one haystack, but now when you got 20 haystacks or 100 haystacks, you need a different, more efficient way of finding it. So that drove the search base. It's also very task-based in that instead of finding an object, going through a hierarchy and finding an object, and then figuring out what to do, we now figure out what do we want to do. Okay, now go find the object or objects that you want to apply it to. And this means that you reduce the number of clicks, you reduce the number of steps, particularly for operations you want to do on multiple systems quite drastically. And then one of the things that's also driven us is UCS Manager, and by extension UCS Central, are very, very powerful. They can configure hundreds of parameters on servers through policies and settings and things like that. But one of the pieces of feedback we usually get is, there's hundreds of things you can change, and in many cases, there's multiple ways you can change these things. And that makes for a very complex experience. One of the things that the team looked at was, what is the best way of doing this? So instead of implementing it 5 different ways, what's the one best way of implementing this, and how do we make that simpler, easier, more straightforward, so that you can ramp up faster and you don't have to remember, well, if I want to change this parameter, which screen do I go to? I just search for it, I pick the task I want to do, and then select the objects, and I do it, and we've tried to streamline that as much as possible.
Sounds like quite a few good drivers behind the UI enhancements.
Absolutely.
So Ewyk, let's shift over to you, and let's talk about some of the features that Jacob had mentioned as being a resident in UCS Central 1.3. And let's start off with HA deployments. I know that there's customers out there that have had some challenges in deploying UCS Central in an HA mode. Can you talk about some of the changes that we've delivered in version 1.3 and how that's going to benefit customers?
Yeah, sure thing. So I see a lot of people, that want to deploy things in an HA mode. They looked at the way we did the shared disks initially with the RDM or raw device mapping, and they said, that doesn't really work great for my environment. Having to manage those and whatnot is a problem. So from their perspective, they wanted something that they didn't have to do lower level storage management with. They wanted to focus on something that could be shared like NFS. And so that's really where we started focusing at, is saying, for those customers that didn't really want to use RDM, we wanted to give them an alternative. We saw some customers have some issues where they may have turned multipathing on that shared disk, and it caused some problems and those types of things, and such. And so they wanted to have something that had a little bit lower overhead of management, and that's really where we picked NFS. So we now support either RDM or NFS as your shared storage for that active passive UCS Central HA environment. The architecture of how we do HA is still really the same. It's still that shared disk infrastructure like we had before with RDM. It's just the medium of how it communicates that's different.
Perfect. Now, how does the user experience change during an initial configuration or as a customer moves from a standalone to an HA through that conversion process?
Really, it becomes the choice of how they will, to configure it. The experience is still the same. They still have to set up, the 2 OVAs the exact same way, or the VMs in the same way. It's just when they go through the configuration of it, they will now have a choice to pick NFS or RDM with that. So that's really where the difference is. You can always still change from standalone into an HA mode if you want, but now you'll have the option to pick either RDM or NFS.
Perfect. So we've had customers that have been moving to global service profile implementations, and Jacob talked to us a little bit about the value of that. Some feedback we've received from customers, the inability to use global pools with both local and global service profiles that have ID qualification policies. Can you talk a little bit about how we've enhanced this in UCS Central 1.3, what's changed, and some of the use cases you see customers wanting to use them for with global service profiles?
Yeah, let's talk first about what an ID block qualification policy is. So when I'm talking about these for a pool, that is, when I talk about an ID block qualification for a pool, that means you can allow a block in a ID pool regardless if it's MAC pool, worldwide port name, node name pools, UUID, etc. Any of those types of pools, you can specify a range of identifiers that can be used for a set of domains or in a domain group. And that allows, some customers to have some segregation of identifiers that these things are meant for these domains, and these other identifiers may be meant for another set of domains. When you start looking to a global environment, most generally, I don't see people using global identifier. When I see them using global identifier pools without the block qualifiers, but there really is. There's a couple of use cases I still see that are very useful for those, and that's around IP pools, especially for SIMC. As you move a service profile around from, let's say, domain X to domain Y to domain Z, you may be moving, from one network to another network, and so you need to change your IPs on your SIMCs. You won't be able to use potentially that same network from one data center to another data center.
So I've heard you talk with customers about this before, and I thought it was a great explanation. Could you talk a little bit about what happens during global service profile creation, association, and disassociation through that entire process?
Yeah, and I'll start with talking about kind of how it worked prior to 1.3 and then what it does now. So the reason why we couldn't support or didn't support this with UCS Central 1.2 and prior was because when you created that service profile, from a template, it would immediately go out and try to grab an identifier from the pool. Well, when you do a local service profile and such, you know exactly where that server sits in the domain group structure, and then you can know exactly where it's going to need to pull an identifier from a block. If you create a service profile from a template and Central with a global service profile, with a global pool, it doesn't necessarily know where it's going to actually grab a server from. You may only create service profiles from a template, leave them unassociated for a time being, and then associate them at a later date. At that point in time, we would know exactly what block to pull from because we don't know the server it's going to go to. So what we end up doing and what we end up adding with this capability is what I'll call is lazy binding. Meaning we're not going to pick an identifier, if you have defined a type of pool that has an identifier, the qualification policy on that block. If you pick a pool, regardless of the pool, if it's MAC, worldwide port name, IP pool, etc., if that service profile references a pool that has that ID qualification policy on a block, we're going to hold and wait. And pick a pool once you've defined the server you want to associate that service profile with. So if you're picking from with the global service profile a pool that doesn't have a ID qualification policy on it, we're going to pick just like normal. We're going to go out and pick something and automatically go ahead and grab it. We're going to grab that ID. But if you try to create a service profile that's unassociated with that has a pool that has an identifier qualification policy on it, we're going to wait. And then once you've started the association process, we're going to go out and grab the identifier at that point in time. So once we've actually did that binding and bound the service profile, the global service profile with that server, we're going to go ahead and then start consuming identifiers from the pool. If we talk about disassociation, during disassociation, if that pool is a non-qualified identifier pool, meaning it doesn't have any qualification policies per block, then we're going to keep that identifier with that unassociated service profile. But if it is using like a qualified identifier pool, then we're going to release that ID that was in use. And so that meaning because we don't know where the target could go at another, if you move it from one domain to another domain, it may need to pick from a different block. And going back to that example I said before, like an IP address for a SIMC, you might need to go grab a different IP for that SIMC. And it works the same way when you're doing migration. We're going to keep the identifiers where we can if there's no qualification on that particular pool. If there is an ID qualifier, we will try to keep the same ID if we can. Otherwise, we might have to release it and get another one from a different block that will be qualified for that target server.
So one of the challenges that I've heard about from customers is around the day zero configuration scenarios and using network resources like VLAN and VSANs. How have we enhanced the user experience with UCS Central when consuming the VLANs and VSAN management?
Yeah, we've had a lot of customers say we have a chicken and the egg problem. Today, if you want to use global VLANs and global VSANs, you really need to have what we call a carrier to bring those things down. With UCS Central, when we do a service profile association, a global service profile association, it brings all the objects it needs down with it. If it brings down all the policies and brings down all of the VLAN, VSAN resources from Central and applies it as shadow objects or read-only objects into UCS Manager. Well, there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg problem from some customers' view where they do a lot of that day zero deployment, which when I mean day zero, they're doing their networking configuration, creating their port channels and for their Ethernet side or their fiber channel side, and they want to go ahead and be able to use those global VLANs and VSANs and set up all that configuration prior to having to associate a service profile with it. So instead of having to have that global service profile carrier bring all of those global VLANs and VSANs down, they want to go ahead and have it pushed down first to get everything set up, check it all out first, and then we can start creating resources from that.
So at the outset of the call, when Jacob was describing the usage of UCS Central, he talked about having customers use it to get visibility into their environment. And I know that having Central as a clearinghouse for faults across domains is something that we see customers do. Now, could you tell us about some of the enhancements that customers are going to see if they want to be able to query and see all of the UCS faults in UCS Central directly without having the GUI pulling the data directly from UCSM? Can you tell us a little bit more about enhancements that we made there?
Yeah, I mean, that was a common complaint from a lot of customers. When you go look at the fault summary view, you see the counters and those types of things. And if you want to get the details of what faults are in that counter, you click on the UI, and we go and fetch all of the information from UCS Manager directly for those particular faults. And that created some security issues and some concerns for customers around certificates and a little bit of usability concern. So what we ended up doing is, as part of our inventory process, where we have that UCS Manager, UCS Central communication back and forth, we went and started grabbing all of the fault details from UCS Manager and pulled them into Central. And so that gives us a truly now centralized fault summary view where you can use things like PowerShell or API directly through other integrations to be able to get a truly centralized view and visibility of all the faults that are occurring in UCS Central and the managers it's communicating with. And so that has some really good view from the customer point of view. So now, because they can actually see all of the issues that, from one place, they can query through the API for all of those issues in one single place. It makes the user experience at the GUI level a lot better because now, everything is communicating directly with UCS Central only. It didn't have to have that sideband interface directly into UCS Manager to get information anymore.
Now, it sounds like between what we heard from Jacob and what we just heard from you, there's a ton of user-related enhancements that are packed into UCS Central 1.3. And we do have one more thing, and Jacob mentioned it off the top of the session, around some of the UI enhancements. And he talked about this new task and search-based UI. I want to bring in Juan Carlos Pantaza now. So, Juan Carlos, can you provide some commentary around why Cisco decided to move into this direction in developing a new UI for UCS Central?
Sure. So basically, we're three main things. One was usability. The other one was scale and performance. And another big issue we had was the technology deprecation. It was built on top of Flex. It's a technology that is going away. So those were the three main things. For usability, the problem we had was that UCS Central was built like a shadow of what was UCSM was at that point, and we didn't have any customer feedback at that point. Even when UCSM started, it was built without customer feedback because we didn't have that one. Now today we have the advantage of having all these not only UCSM users but also actual current UCS Central users. So we went and we talked to them, we got their feedback, we saw what we were doing, what was useful for them, what was not useful for them. So it was a big effort to just collect all this information, and then we realized that the way the UCS Central users use the application is totally different than the way UCSM users use the application. For example, they rely a lot of templates instead of manual service profiles. They rely a lot of pools instead of static IDs. So because it makes sense at that kind of load, you can't do everything manually. So it was something that we needed to change and figure out how this application was being used by current UCS Central users, and how can we improve the usability. As Jacob mentioned before, the tree navigation, it was not very good a multi-domain environment. It was very confusing and very complicated to navigate to single object and execute some action. So we did the analysis, and we came up with this task-based and search-based UI. So that's pretty much the most important thing we're changing, was the usability and how users will use the application, and that's how we're going to keep doing it forward. We gather feedback of how they use it, and then we try to make it easy. As Jacob also mentioned, is like UCSM is so powerful. UCS you can do so many things. We have so many tools, but at some point it gets confusing in the large scale environment. And how can I do this one thing? So we noticed that 80% of our users use one way to do it, and we're also focusing on what would be the best way to do that one thing for this kind of environment. So that's how we are trying to focus this UI. And then in terms of scale, it's the technology and the architecture that we had. It was like a mirroring of UCSM, and as we start getting more information, more data, we noticed it was not going to be able to scale where we wanted to scale. So that was another big thing. We needed to do something to change it. And as I mentioned before, the technology deprecation was also a big factor of doing this. Also, because we want to enable it, it's on top of Flex, and Flex is it's built on top of Adobe Flash Player. It runs in Adobe Flash Player, and it can't work on tablets. So we're trying to get to the mobile environment so we can make some of these features available for tablets. That's probably our main target.
That sounds interesting. So it sounds like quite a bit is changing within the UCS Central web and application layers. And you explained to us the why. Now, can you comment a little bit on the what? What are some of the design principles that are changing in UCS Central, and what are some of the technologies that were adopted for the UI development?
Sure. So basically, to start with, we have to change the way we think, the way we develop. We were developing before without any feedback because we didn't have any feedback. We were not central users at that point, and we didn't know exactly how it was going to work. So the assumption was let's put the same thing as UCSM is doing today, because probably users, they don't want to get trained again on a new tool and how to use it. Over time, we realize they use it totally different, so they're not really attached to that way that UCSM works. If you provide a better way, they will be even happier. So we changed the way, we changed our mindset as we don't have to follow the same as UCSM is doing, because it's a totally different use case. So we changed that, and now we also, the way we develop, we go through usability test, user analysis, we talk to customer, we have direct communication with them, and that helps us to build a more intuitive UI, and it makes the experience a lot easier, and also the way they manage their environment a lot easier. So one thing is what we think and how we do stuff, and then the other thing, the major thing we did, was the change of the architecture. We moved from Adobe Flex, that is, everything runs on the client. We moved to HTML and JavaScript and modern libraries, JavaScript libraries and CSS libraries on the browser. So we're moving all the impact, all the processing from the browser. We added an application server now that is doing all this mashup of data. We gather all the information. We can talk directly from the application server. We can talk directly to UCSM, or we can talk to UCS Central, get the information, and then just send the necessary information to the browser. So it's a lot less chatty, and we only send the necessary information to the browser. So that makes the application faster. We don't rely on the browser's machine as much as we did it before, because before we were, you start getting data, we start caching all that data in the browser. So we were like relying a lot on the browser. And now we move that dependency back to the backend, where we can control it. We can, if we need to scale up, we can do something, and it's in our hands to keep that environment working. We don't depend as much on the client side. So the application server helps us a lot. And then the other thing was the event channel. We on the Flex application, the way we get information from Central is through events. So there were way too many event channels connected to the browser, and then the browser was processing a lot of information. So on a scale environment, the browser was doing a lot of work that was probably unnecessary. Moving that to the application server, where the application server is processing the events and only send the necessary information if the client needs it, it helps a lot on also in performance. Also, the way we propagate those events to the client is by subscription only. So the client subscribes to what they need to see live, and that also makes a big difference. Probably another thing is a big change is the previous Flex and UCSM assumed that everything is live. Anybody that changed something, it will get immediately pushed to everybody that is looking at that screen. And then when we were talking to customers, they were like, I don't really need that. I am interested on this thing that I'm doing. I'm interested on live data about faults and configuration and things like that. But if somebody changed the description of something, it would probably bother me that I'm modifying something and then something changed suddenly. So we make the application where the live data is it's optional on certain areas, that gathering feedback, in talking to customers, they said, I want this live, this is live, this shouldn't be live, this I don't care. this kind of thing help us to scale a lot better and have better user experience. And probably to be able add in also the application server, it also helps us to communicate to UCSM through the application server. So Central is always talking, so the HTML web page is always talking to UCS Central. And Central application server is the one in charge to talking to any different kind of endpoint. So we won't have issues with certificates or any of that, because it's the application server that is doing the cross communication with other endpoints.
So it sounds like we've really gained a tremendous amount of maturity in terms of how we view customers using UCS Central. We've evolved the product based on their usage, as well as the technology choices we've made. So it sounds like a great set of enhancements for customers. And I know when I was talking with Jacob, he mentioned some of the capabilities, and Eric dug deeper into why those matter. And with the UI, I think what we've really provided is an enhancement to the point that it really adapts to users and the way technology is intended to be used. Can you talk about the main benefits that we expect customers to recognize with this new style of interface and workflow with the UI? I mean, just how they interact with the various technology pieces.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what is more important after we do all this usability thing and change the architecture is what is the benefit for the end user. And one of the key things here is how simple it is right now. When you want to create something, it's 1 or 2 clicks away from you, instead of multiple clicks away trying to figure out the context where you want to create something or delete something or create a task. So this simplicity is our key thing here. It's not an easy job to remove stuff. We are trying to cut everything that is not useful for this kind of environment. We are trying to focus on usability for multi-domain environment. It's in a specific task, it's in a specific environment, and we're trying to make the life easier for that kind of environment and make it as simple as possible. So it is very hard to figure out what is really being used by the majority of our users, and after that is that the best way to do it. So simplicity is probably key here. And now, adding the simplicity of how you use the application and how you configure your environment, also there is this new concept of personalization. So every user could have its own dashboard. So we introduced the concept of a user profile. And this is something that is going to explode through a lot of other things. Right now, we're delivering the user dashboard. So you can have all the objects across the application, you can pin them, and it will move to your dashboard. So you can have easy access to certain things that you care about. But we also have pre-built user dashboard widgets that could be like the state of your licenses, the fault counters, there are a lot of things about firmware, hardware. So we built this specific dashboard widgets based on user feedback, and we're going to keep building more. We have a list of things that we need to do, gathering the feedback of the user. So they are asking for multiple other things to have them pinned as a dashboard widget. And then this dashboard widget is personalized. So if you're an operations guy, you care about certain things, and if you're an administrator, you probably care about another things, like the list of users that are currently logged in. And things like that. So you can have that personalized dashboard, and in the future, this user profile will have a lot of other things like tagging, your favorite search, your history of whatever you're doing. So we are increasing the number of use cases we can make use of the user profile. And then the consistency of how you do stuff. So as we went through the design of the application, we defined the standards, how things are going to be, and how are you going to create one thing. You will create that one thing the same way that you create any other thing. So there is only one way to create stuff, or delete stuff, or access stuff. There is a set of patterns that we have already set up on the application. And then we talk about the navigation. It's a search-based navigation. So easy access to anything. You can either search by name, and this easy access navigation is also something that we are improving. Right now we're doing it by name and by type, so you can select, show me the service profile that is called something, and it will show you a list of objects that could be the same name of different organizations. And then you can easily access that one. But our goal is to have a search that you can search for anything, and you can easily find it. So that's how we want to approach it. And then another thing is, once it's the easy navigation, and then the other one is the easy task, easy creation of stuff. So you can say, I want to create a boot policy, and I want it on this org. So you're one click away, you search for create boot policy, and you start entering, you select where you want to put it, and save. So easy access to create stuff, but also that box of create something could also lead us to task-based. So that's why we call it task-based UI, because before we used to have ask the user all this information to do something, like go to this pop-up and go to this screen, when in reality the only thing we need is give me the information, and then the application server will take care of all these multiple transactions that needs to be done. So there are a lot of different tasks that we have already in design of how can you, for example, your initial configuration of an org. You say, I'm going to create an org with these users, with this type of policies. You click next, 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 and done. We will do the transaction on everything that needs to be done, but for the user, it's just like, I'm creating an org. So that kind of simplicity we try to add also to the task-based UI.
So it sounds like we've really adapted the product and anticipated what customers are looking for, and made it far easier for them to really use the product and engage with UCS Central. So that's excellent in terms of usability. Now, Ewyk, let's shift back to you. We've heard yourself, Jacob, and Juan Carlos talking about the product. Let's see it. Do you have a demo that you can share with us and walk us through some of these enhancements?
Yeah, most definitely we'll do that. So let me go ahead and share my desktop here. So you guys should be able to see that. See my desktop here about with the new UI. So a couple of the key things, like, just to hit on some of the things Carlos was talking about, this is that dashboard view that he was talking about, where you can reorganize or reorder things, you can pin things to that you might want to be able to see in your environment. I mean, this is the default dashboard, but that doesn't mean you can't add a heck of a lot more to this. Like he was saying before, that left pane hierarchy that we showed before, it's gone. You don't see that on that right side anymore. But for those people that are very familiar with it, it really is still there. It's still up at the top where I can see my organizations. In my case, I have a pretty small org tree, just reduction in QA. And on my domain group side, you can still see I have all of my domain groups at the top. So it allows me to be able to still have visibility into that hierarchy, but it's not how it's not the single point that you always pivot around like we did with UCS Central's GUI before. really, one thing, I get a lot of customer feedback that says, in Manager, it is not too hard to find my service profiles when I only have, 100 or 200 of them. But when you start to scale like those thousands or 2,000 servers, finding that needle in the haystack is a more difficult thing. So one thing that we really focused on is try to provide you kind of visibility globally at the different types of objects. So for instance, if I wanted to look at a service profile, here I can see all of my service profiles first. And then if I want to start filtering those things on like the organization, then I can start doing that. I can say, here, show me all my service profiles, get the health of them and whatnot. And if I want to start looking at them from a service org perspective, I can. If I want to start filtering them based upon something like a service profile template they were created from, I can. If I want to start looking at ones that maybe are critically faulted, etc., I can. You're going to see this, that Carlos's team developed everything that you want to view, regardless if it's a logical item like a service profile or a physical item like a domain or a server, etc. This view with the filters on the left and the items on the right is going to be consistent. That's one thing that his team really focused on, is driving consistency in all the different types of views. So if I wanted to click on a particular service profile, I can see that view here as well. You'll notice here I got all of the tabs on the top as well. So if I wanted to go back for whatever reason and view those lists of service profiles, I can, and I still have that same context as what I had before. But now it allows me to get the view of when we're viewing objects is quite different as well. One of the things you'll see at the top is every type of object we're going to give you its name. What is it really? Is it a service profile? Is it a server? Is it a domain, etc.? And then tell you where that location of where it sits in its respective hierarchy. If it's a domain, it'll be in a domain group. If it's a server, it'll be in in that domain. If in this case it's a service profile, so it's in an organization. One of the things you'll see is we've really focused at organizing the data in a very consistent and a much easier to navigate fashion. So we did a lot of the views where you have different views of, what am I using from an identifier perspective? What's my connectivity look like? If I use, in this case, I'm using LAN and SAN connectivity policies and such. And we give you a view. We really try to make, embed a lot more data and items into this, where I can say, okay, I've got ETH0 here. I can click on it, and it brings up information in that single view about ETH0. I can start to look at the different configurations about them. Let's say I needed to look at something like this particular template. I can say, oh, this particular ETH1 is based on this ETH1-B template. Then I can bring up really quickly that information. I don't have to go to that hierarchy again and link across and then have another pop-up show up and those types of things. It really helps us navigate quickly and see the relationships of the objects in my GUI and in my view. One of the things we really focused on is that visualization. You saw it first around the service profile, where I start to see things like visual indicators on health. So this particular green bar on the left will change as we start to get faults and those types of things in my environment. This is a healthy service profile, but if it did have some warnings or what have you, or minor, major, critical faults, this will change color from yellow to orange to red or blue to help me quickly see, oh, I have a problem with this. I should probably investigate what's going on in my environment. We also have really tried to overlay a lot more information into this as well. You can see that the service profile was created from the prod SPT template. It's associated to the Circ Blade 1 chassis 1 on this particular domain. It's a UB200M3. And if I wanted to get information about this, we can always easily just click and pop out and see the information about this particular server. Again, the consistency is here. We can see consistent look and feel on a physical object versus a logical object, logical being the service profile and whatnot. I can see all that inventory right there. If we go back and look at something like that service profile template, I can see exactly, oh, this is on that prod SPT service profile template. I can pop out and see that information and then see exactly, oh, I've got 3 service profiles running on this particular template. Here's its configuration on that particular template, what pools I'm using, what connectivity templates I'm using, etc. If I want to start to get an understanding of who's using it, I can just pop out a nice view here. Query is exactly what service profiles were created from this template and what's their status. And so I can do some filtering on it. Maybe their status was had a different it was unconfigured or I had a problem. I'll get provided more views here as well of what's wrong. One of the things that they really focused on, Carlos's team really focused on, is trying to consolidate the different types of things you're going to do within the GUI and whatnot. So one of the things you're seeing across all the different screens here is on this top right, on a particular object or across like the whole GUI itself, you're going to see actions. You're going to see actions like edit. I got my clone, I got delete. I can, get audit log information about this object. I can create service profile for the template, etc. So if I ever want to do something with this particular service profile or service profile template or object, I always go to that top right. If I want to manipulate it, I want to, get in more information like faults and audits, I'm going to go to that top right. One thing, like what Carlos is talking about, we really started focusing on, not having everything update all the time. So the things that don't update here, if I ever need to refresh this data, I just refresh, just hit this top right, and we're going to query what you're seeing here, not the whole data model of what's restored in Central. So it makes that speed and such a lot faster than what I've had in the past. So again, what you're seeing here is we're being able to quickly see the environments. And quickly move around and start to see relationships. But maybe I don't know what I'm looking for. Maybe I want to find that needle in the haystack. So what I can start to do is use this thing at the top, this search view. What am I looking for? In this case, I want to look for a service profile. So I can just start typing service, and it's going to filter this list as I go along and say, hey, I want to look for a particular service profile. I'm going to say service profile. And I'm looking for the service profile that maybe have prod in the name. So I can say, boom, I'm going to query that, and then there are my 3 service profiles that have prod in the name. Maybe I'm looking for, now I want to look for my QA servers. I can say QA, and then it's going to research and give me the information about the servers with the QA in the name. If I wanted to get information about this, then I can click on it and say it's going to open up another tab, and it's going to show me information about this. So this is a great way of finding that needle in the haystack. I mean, it really helps you understand. I don't have to know. If I know the name of the server that I need to get, but I don't remember exactly where in the hierarchy I placed it, that's okay. I can find that thing pretty quickly and easily. But another way I get a lot of requests from are wanting an easier way to open items and information about that about a particular domain group or a organization, and that's where this top level tree does come into play. And Carlos's team has made some nice views to be able to search in that particular element. So now if I click on a particular organization, in this case, I can quickly have a launch point to launch information about service profiles in this case. So I can go and launch a service. Click here, click service profiles. It's going to launch another tab here. And show me, a pre-filtered view of the service profiles that live in that production organization. So then that gives me, a way to be able to, do some of that pre-filtering for me pretty easily from that particular point of view. A lot of some of the other feedback that we've gotten from a lot of our customers is, when I do things like create pools or policies, I may create them with the same names, and I want to know, where things are sitting and how I've configured some different items in my environment. So that's where I can the way that we're showing all the different policies, no matter where things sit, I can start to now go and look. Here's all the policies that I have, and if I have multiple in this case LAN connectivity policies, it's going to show me a list of all those items. And if I switch over and show you some of the things like some of the templates, I've got some templates like VNIC and VHBA templates that are in use across a bunch of different environments, and I can start to see, okay, if I want to update this particular ETH0-A template, who's using it? How many times has it been defined and other things? And I can start to see exactly what's going on in my environment. Now, if you kind of transition to that task kind of use case and you go to the top right, it shows us what do you want to do. So now, let's say I've created, I've started, wanting to add more in my environment, and I want to start creating some pools. So let's say I want to start maybe create a Mac pool or something of that sort. I can just start typing, Mac, and it's going to filter that list and show me, oh, hey, you want to create a Mac pool? Great, let's create a Mac pool. So again, maybe I don't know what I want to do. I don't know. I need to go, like in the old UI, I need to go to a particular tab and find the particular element in the left side hierarchy and whatnot. Now I can just start typing text in that task space and say, great, reduce the number of clicks, as Carlos was saying, to be able to do an action. So in this case, I want to create a Mac pool. I want to create a pool in the QA organization. We're just going to call this, testing 1, 2, 3, just for a quick demo, and then I can go and create my block. So let's say I want to create a block with, let's go ahead and do 2B. Oops. Want to go ahead and create a block here with 2B in here, and so let's say I want to create 256 of this range. One thing that Carlos and team has done is it helps you not shoot yourself in the foot with this. You can see, oh, if I were to create this, there's a lot of conflicts in my environment. In the previous UI, you could just go and create it and not realize you just created potentially a block or a range of IDs that are being used elsewhere. So I can see here, there's of this 256 blocks, they're already created somewhere else, and they're potentially a conflict. They're potentially are in use with another another set of systems. So now I can start to see, oh, I've created this particular range and a couple blocks and some domains. I can click on this element. It's going to pop up it's going to give me some data about where it's being used and is it an item in Central? Is it an item in a particular domain? So maybe I don't really want to create this create this particular block and such. And so we're helping you do the right thing and not shoot yourself in the foot, and giving you that data as you're doing that creation process. So I really probably don't want to commit this and such. Well, anyway, that's a quick demo of what the new UI looks like, and such.
So thanks, Eric. That looks great. I'm sure customers are out there, really excited about the focus on the user and performing tasks and making interacting with UCS Central a lot easier. But I know there's going to be at least some customers that might be used to or familiar with the existing UI from 1.2 and might want to test the waters, certainly take advantage of some of the other features in UCS Central 1.3. So could you tell me a little bit about the UI? Is it the only UI, or what if customers want to use that legacy UI?
So this is not a rip and replace at this point. I mean, it's something that, as Carlos was saying, we're planning to deprecate the old UI over time because of the technologies going away. But it's something that we're still developing with for those customers that want us to do that longer transition. We're still working on creating more features, more widgets, more elements inside of it, and fine-tuning it over the next couple releases. But we will plan to deprecate the old Flex UI like Carlos was saying, but it's not going to be immediate. We're going to have some transition point for that.
Now, I know one of the most popular resources we have out on our community site is the Best Practices Guide. And are there any plans to update that Best Practices Guide?
Yeah, our plans for that is we're going to be updating that very shortly. So in the Tech Talk itself, there's a link to it. It's going to be updated in the next couple 3 days once we release this particular UCS Central 1.3 release. And we're going to end up creating 2 versions of it. So the best practice guide, as it sits today, focuses purely on the old Flex UI and how to do things inside of it. We're going to update that particular document for the old style UI, and then create a net new one that focuses on how to do the same things in the new framework. And that will be the one that we maintain over time going forward as we release newer versions of UCS Central. The new one will be maintained only going forward.
And how about some of the other resources that have been prepared for UCS Central? Can you tell us a little bit about other resources?
Yeah, we're working on some getting started videos with our documentation team and my team as well to help people get started of what are some of the things that you might want to do in UCS Central with the new UI, what are some of the workflows that you would need to do with them and whatnot. And secondly, we're working on completing our PowerShell SDK UCS Power Tool for Central. That should be completed in GA and supporting 1.3 very shortly. And one of the things that it's going to support is that VLAN, VSAN push that we talked about previously, because that is something that's not going to be available through our API or through our UI. It's only going to be available to be able to push a particular VLAN, VSAN, etc. through the CLI and the API. So to do that type of automation, you're going to need something like UCS Power Tool to be able to drive that configuration.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I think I just have one more question for Jacob, and that's the anticipated release date. Do we have a release date target for UCS Central 1.3?
Absolutely. We are hoping to release this very shortly, definitely within the next week, and hopefully sooner rather than later in that week.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jacob. I want to redirect people or make sure that you are aware of our community site where all of the resources that Ewyk had mentioned will be available. That's available at communities.cisco.com/UCS. I want to take a moment to thank our panelists today, Ewyk, Carlos, and Jacob, for your time, as well as our audience for participating. So thank you again, and stay tuned for future UCS Tech Talks. Have a great day.